After the last video, you guys were asking for this. So over the past week, I replayed Crash Bandicoot 2 and Spyro the Dragon 2, and I genuinely didn't expect to feel so strongly about one of them, even preferring one of them over the recent remakes. So the question is, which one of them holds up today? Starting with Crash, and it's definitely an improvement over the first game, but the story is still kind of a nothing burger. The biggest issue is that we already know that Cortex is playing Crash from the very first cutscene, so when Coco finally reveals it, the big twist at the end really doesn't land. There is the added layer of collecting gems for Dr. Brio to unlock an alternate ending, which is a nice touch and gives completionists something extra to aim for, but even that doesn't add a huge amount of narrative weight. Spyro 2 is easily a step up from the original. The world building is way better, even if the main plot is just save Avalar from Ripto. Honestly, Ripto felt like a bit of a boring villain. He kind of feels like a louder, angrier version of Cortex. I did, however, enjoy the stories in each individual level. So while neither game is heavily story driven, Spyro 2 takes this one. Starting with Spyro 2, and not a lot has changed here from the first game, but honestly, that's not a bad thing at all. The core movement still feels smooth and familiar, with a few nice additions layered on top. You now have climbing and swimming, and the swimming in particular feels actually really good to control. On top of that, the small hover you get at the end of a glide is a great quality of life addition. Gives you a little bit of forgiveness if you're not gonna make the jump. The only real downside I still have with Spyro is the camera. I found myself fighting with it quite a bit to line up the way that I wanted, which can get a bit frustrating in tighter moments. But overall, the movement still feels solid and responsive. Now there's Crash 2, and I do not know what Naughty Dog were cooking here, but the movement feels almost flawless compared to the first game. Everything feels way more responsive, you're not randomly walking off edges anymore, and the platforming feels so much tighter and controlled overall. Then you've got the slide jump, which completely changes how you can approach certain levels. You can use it to skip sections, chain movements together, or just stick to the standard jumps if you want a safer route. It also feels like Crash's basic movement, like running and jumping, have also been improved. He just feels faster, and his jumps seem to go further and higher, although that just might be my own experience playing. Overall, Crash 2 feels way more refined in every way here. This one easily goes to Crash. I did see some of the comments saying that combat really isn't the focus of these games, so I'll try and keep this section brief. But starting with Spyro 2, and it hasn't changed all that much from the original. You're still dealing with the same basic rules. If an enemy is too large, you use the fire breath, and if they're wearing metal, you have to charge them. Even though Spyro technically has more moves than Crash, combat still feels like it's taken a bit of a backseat here in favor of the collectibles and the side minigames. That said, the power-up gates do add a bit of variety, giving you things like Super Flame or temporary invincibility, which helps break things up a little bit. But overall, the enemy design is starting to feel a little stale at this point. Combat rarely pushes you to do anything different from the first game. Now for Crash Bandicoot 2, and this feels like a massive step up from the first game. With the addition of the slide, we now have enemies that can only be taken out using that slide, which instantly adds more variety on how you approach encounters. On top of that, there are a lot more enemy types that actually make you think a bit before rushing in. Some have spikes on their sides, forcing you to jump on their heads, while others actually have temporary immunity. With this added enemy variety, combined with Crash's expanded moveset, combat just feels more engaging overall. So for me, this section goes to Crash. Starting with Spyro 2, and it closely follows the structure of the first game. One central hub world with individual levels accessed through portals. I did like the variety in the levels, each with their own themes, characters, and enemies. For the most part, they actually feel like real places where these characters live, rather than just being an obstacle course filled with enemies like the first game. There's a bit more world building here, which I really appreciated. However, what I didn't enjoy as much was how much the focus shifts towards the minigames. Things like the hockey or hurting the creatures are fine in small doses, but at times it felt like the platforming itself took a bit of a backseat compared to the first game. I'll also mention Moneybags, and it might be a hot take, but I didn't like how much the progression is locked behind paying him. It makes sense for unlocking some abilities, sure, but he shows up a lot, and it often feels like you're just hitting a paywall to access parts of a level, like opening a bridge or revealing a pathway. Now for Crash, and the warp room is a great evolution of how levels are structured. It feels like a natural progression direction from the first game, while also giving the developers a lot more freedom with variety. You can go from a sewer level to an ice stage to a jungle, and it all works within the structure of the game. The levels themselves are really strong with a good amount of challenge throughout, although the difficulty definitely ramps in the last 10 levels. The only downside for me is the ice levels. I just could not stand them. It's probably just a skill issue, but I found myself just getting more frustrated every time a section showed up. That being said, when you combine the solid levels with Crash's improved movement, these stages are consistently fun to play through from start to finish. So this one goes to Crash. Both these soundtracks are absolute classics, but when you hear them side to side, I think there's a pretty clear winner. And I'll be honest, I really like both, and Spyro definitely has great atmospheric music that fits its worlds perfectly. And in both games, the soundtracks for each level really fit the individual level's vibe incredibly well. Everything feels tailored to where you are and what you are doing. But for me, Crash Bandicoot 2 just has more tracks that stick in your head. I actually found myself humming the Crash tunes around the house without even thinking about it. Each level has really catchy, energetic themes that stay with you long after you put the controller down. Spyro's soundtrack is great for setting the atmosphere, but Crash's music is just more memorable overall. So for me, this one goes to Crash. So after putting Crash Bandicoot 2 and Spyro 2 head to head, it's clear that both made massive improvements over the originals. They both still hold up incredibly well today, but when we tally up the point, there is a clear winner. Spyro takes the win in the story and world building, but Crash 2 just sweeps in almost every other category. For me, Crash 2 is the game that's aged the best. It feels fantastic to play, and honestly, I couldn't put the controller down. I'll even go a step further and say I actually had more fun playing the original PS1 version than the remake. There's just a specific weight to the movement and a charm to the low poly art that the modern version just did not capture. However, both of these games have way more personality than most titles coming out today. But if you had to pick one right now, which one are you grabbing first? Crash 2 or Spyro 2? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.